So let's say you found a skeleton. How would you tell if it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
All right, hey everybody, thanks for stopping in. So today I am going to take a look at how to make some procedural clouds. Now this is just a texture map of Earth. I'm not doing anything fancy because we don't care about the planet. This is just about the clouds. I'm going to start with some planet clouds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to Shift D. I'm going to slightly scale this up, get rid of the material, and I'm going to go to a material that you might make using some image textures. We're going to start with that and see what some of the problems there can be. So we'll go to shader editor, add in a, doesn't really matter actually at this point. So I'm going to add in a texture, and we're going to go to my downloads. All right, so we're going to, there we go. So I downloaded this earlier today. Now, sorry, for a static shot, this can actually work really well. If it is going to open for me, which, you know, hey, why would you want to open? Oh, I'm glad you liked the intro vid. There we go. Okay, so, shove this into our alpha, and then set it to something. Setting. Well, let's change ours. Go to settings. I know what I'm doing. There we go. Okay, so we get these nice clouds, and this is pretty great, right? Because this is actually taking in real data. NASA made this. All that cool stuff. But I don't care about the planet. Dabber Dino forever on the internet. Fair enough. Okay. So here's one of the things though. Let's say you want to rotate these clouds or have them change or anything. Well, if they rotate, one of the things you'll notice is that these actually are kind of designed in a certain way so that they sort of make sense geographically, which is great, but then if they rotate someplace else, they make less sense. Not a whole lot. But the other big thing that you'll notice is that when you rotate them, the clouds themselves don't change at all. So let's say you set it up so that over the course of, say, 250 frames here, we're going to rotate, so we'll do a rotation here, and then we're going to rotate, say, 20 degrees. So we do rotation, we'll set that to vector, okay, so, and then we'll set the Earth to rotate 10 degrees under it. Oh, actually, we just won't. Okay, so, from a stationary point above Earth, this is what you get. The clouds don't change. But they do change in real life. So instead of using this, we're going to use some procedural clouds. So get out of here. We're going to put in, oh, that was the Earth. That was 7. All right, so we're going to get rid of this image. Instead, we're going to put in a noise texture. Now I have noise or Node Wrangler enabled, but I mean, this is just the same as plugging this into the emission here, whatever. So I'm going to also set up mapping, and it's important to set this to 4D. Okay. Sorry, my throat gets dry, so I have a drink here. We're going to go and add in a color ramp. Okay, we're going to add in a new, too many flags. Whatever, get rid of one. I'm going to set this down to black. Go to B-spline, because that gives us a smoother transition. And then we're going to slide this up here until we get out there. Scale it up some. That looks reasonable. Up the detail just so we get actual cloud looking things. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So we'll put that back in the alpha. We'll come here. Okay, so these are actually a little bit sparse, so I'm going to bring the white in here. Actually, you know what? I'm going to add another flag, shove it over here, make it white. Okay, so these are still a little bit on the sparse side. Let's turn this detail down to like, oops, that was scale. Put this back. Let's put this detail down to like 2. Well, you know what? Let's up the rough this a little bit. Really good. Whatever. You can play with this setting until you like it. That's not the most important part. So the really important part here is Okay, first, while we have this rotating, what you can do, keyframe the W factor. Over here, now make sure you use a small W factor, like maybe 0.1, right? Then you, again, make sure it's on the interpolation is set to vector. And then, actually one thing we can do that's pretty cool is if I pull up a graph editor, so we'll pull in a graph editor, and with this selected, Shift E and add a linear extrapolation. We'll do the same thing for the object data, for the objects, so we have some Z rotation here. We will Shift E, linear extrapolation. So now, one of the things you'll notice is that the clouds will slowly shrink and grow, and see, this is starting to go away, that little bit right there. And then if we say just up this to like, say, I don't know, 500. Actually, let's just, let's kill the rotation on the clouds for now. So let's, okay, so, oh, I guess I accidentally had that selected too. And then actually 0.01 might have been a little bit too low, so let's try 0.02. Now it's one of those things, you just gotta play with it. And then we will, let's see, your extrapolation. Alright, so maybe that's still too low. Let's try again with 0.1. See what happens. One of those things where you just experiment, right? There we go, that's pretty good. So now you can see that this is really changing. Now, of course, you know, depending on exactly what your render settings are, you know, you're going to get more or less of this kind of hazy mist and dot stuff. And if you go to cycles, it might work a little bit better or worse. There you go. But you can also change this up. So like, let's say, instead of using like say generated or maybe object or whatever, you want to use like another noise texture. One thing you can do is you're going to want to change this. Set this down to like one of these in here, and then you'll get swirly clouds, which maybe you like that better. Of course, you're going to want to change, you know, work with this. You can also do something like, oh, that's not what I meant to do. Also give a Control T, Shift Control T. Come on. Oh my goodness, Blender. Why you do this to me? Sorry about that, everybody. You know what? I just have one here. I'll just use this one. Whatever. Okay, so compiling shaders. All right, so then you can also do something like, you know, I want to say scale it up on the z-axis and get bands. You could use that for like a gas giant. Whereas the gas giant goes, the clouds are actually going to change. So from one frame to the next, they'll be different, but they'll still keep that banded appearance. You can do that. Node Wrangler is totally worth it. Totally worth it. But okay, so let's say though that you want to use this for something like a world, right? So that's great for using a planet. Now you know how to use the W value, animate it, and it can get your clouds to morph. You can change the exact detail on them. You can do all the normal stuff that you normally do with noise textures to change how the clouds look on any given frame, and then you can animate that W value and get it to smoothly change over time. Great stuff. Okay, but let's say I want to do this with the world. So get a world in here. We'll make sure I use nodes. There's the world. So we put in a texture. We want a sky texture. Okay, great. Generic sky texture. And we'll make sure that we're on scene world. Otherwise it won't work. Does sky texture not work on a... Okay, there we go. That's what I want. Okay, so looking up at the sky, there's no clouds. Let's add some clouds. So we will add a noise texture. All right, let's see. And then we'll add a color, mix RGB, add it there, switch this to add. Where did add go? I can't read. There it is. Okay, so let's get a color ramp in here. All right, so again, we're going to go to B-spline, like it better. For things like this, there are times when it's not the better option, but right now, all right. So these aren't amazing, but one thing you can do is, let's say you add in a an empty. So we'll just add in an empty. If I like plain access, it doesn't matter. I'm going to call this empty cloud control. Okay, and we're going to just change this from generated to object and set the object to cloud control. So now cloud control object is actually changing where our clouds appear, right? All right, so that means you can actually, like this, and move it back and forth. So you don't even need to actually animate the W value, because this is simulating moving across in a fourth dimension. And then the next thing you can do is, with the rotation, you can slowly rotate the clouds in the sky to simulate them moving across the sky. So let's say we set the X rotation at frame 1 to 0, and then at frame 500 we will set it to this, so the clouds have flown over our heads a little bit, less than that. Okay, set those to vector, and then with this I will key its location. I'm just moving a little bit on the y-axis. Key that, make sure everything's on vector, and then when I play it, the clouds will not only move, but they'll also slowly change. And boom! Now you have a sky with clouds that not only move across the sky, and you can make sure that you have the rotation set to be very realistic and whatnot. But yeah, also, they change, and you didn't even need to use the 4D effect on that. You can just parent it to an object, if 4D is one of those things that kind of like screws with your brain. Yeah, and so because that is actually a real background, if I add in, say, a view sphere, and we'll give it smooth, we'll just make it like a mirror, right? So put the metallic up all the way, and the roughness down. Yeah, so you'll get accurate reflections, and everything will work. And there you go. You have just added moving, morphing clouds. So there you go. That's one of those tricks where there's a lot of different things you can animate on your procedural nodes that can give you cool morph and movement effects at the same time. And it's one of the things that always bugs me is a lot of times you get CGI clouds that just don't do anything. The fourth dimension does screw with your brain. So I guess, you know what? Since we did do the fourth dimension stuff on the planet, I'll go into a quick little talk about the fourth dimension. So when you look at a three-dimensional world, each eye actually receives a two-dimensional slice of it, right? So you can only really see in 2 dimensions. Your brain tricks itself into perceiving a third dimension by comparing the differences between your 2 eyes and having a rough estimate as to how far they are. So, or how far they are apart. So, what happens if you had a 4D eye in a 4D world is you would actually see a 3D shape when you looked at something, and you would see the whole thing. But you couldn't see through it if it were entirely enclosed, if it were entirely enclosing some 4D space. And so when you get a 4D texture, so let's, instead of this thing here, let's just actually get a noise texture. So we'll get texture, we'll get noise texture. We'll just turn this into the base color. Actually, we'll just change this into the emission, who cares? There we go. All right, so in 3D, right, what this is doing, I'm turning roughness down, or actually up. Okay, so what you're seeing here is Blender is creating based on whatever generated is doing, and to make it simpler, we'll just actually switch it to object. So Blender has a seed value, and based on the location of this object, which in this case is just 0, 0, 0, it's generating a noise pattern at a certain scale. And the noise just gives every single number, or every single point in space, a value from 0 to 1, which is why it goes from black to white. Okay, but that's on 3 coordinates. If I switch this to 4D, now every single coordinate actually has a value from 0 to 1 in 4 dimensions. But the thing is, it can still only display 3 dimensions because Blender's a 3-dimensional program, and there's no really good way to display 4 dimensions in 2D. So, okay. But I can change which coordinate I'm looking at in the W vector, because that is another vector that's perfectly orthogonal to the others. And so, by switching this, I'm changing which slice, which 3D slice, is being projected onto this 2D image of a 3D sphere. And essentially, you can think of it as a seed value, but because it's actually moving slowly through a 4th spatial dimension, it actually morphs smoothly as you drag the slider across. Whereas depending on the pseudo-random noise generator that you might get for a actual seed value, you might not actually get smooth morphing depending on exactly how it works. So there you go. That is that's some very basic stuff about 4D, why the 4D slider works so well for making smooth transitions, and how you can do simple, cool little sky tricks like this. And again, you can play with the clouds to make them higher definition or lower definition. You can also use similar tricks with volumetric clouds. So if you drive the density of a volumetric system with a 4D texture, you can animate the 4th dimension to cause, like swirls, not swirls in the clouds, but the clouds themselves to change shape as they move. So like, let's say you have the clouds moving across your scene, like a fog or something. And, oh, thank you. So let's say you have like fog moving in across your scene, but you also want it to sort of not just move, but also change shape a little bit as it goes, as, actually happens. Switch it to 4D noise, animate the W vector. Hey Icarus, welcome to the show, man. I just wanted to make a quick tutorial about that. It's not even been 18 minutes, but I am going to get out of here. I appreciate A Groovy and C. Bailey Films coming out, and yeah, there you go. That's it for me. See y'all later.
Thanks for watching, but before you go, I'd like to take a minute to say thank you to my patrons and channel members on YouTube. They help me make this channel possible, and without them, I couldn't keep going. Specifically, I want to thank my $20 and above patrons, Bent Hovend, Ian Chen, Sphincter of Doom, Chris Love, Henry Hutanen, and Bob Knob. If you'd like to join the channel or become a patron, links are in the description, and if that's not right for you, but you want some other way to help out, there's also an Amazon wishlist, as well as a Teespring store where you can get Dapper Dino merchandise. If none of that works for you, just liking and sharing this video really helps out. I'm the Dapper Dinosaur.